And we're now live. A little bit of technical difficulty in that your moderator had to restart his computer. But welcome to this broadcast of talking about the first 2013 Hokie Stormchase trip. And we have a very distinguished panel here today, and all who are experienced chasers, meaning they've been on at least 2 chases with us. It's one of they may have been on one chase as a leader and one chase as a student, but that's fine because that's what we're here to talk about. So I'm going to start on my screen, which is probably not on everybody else's screen, on the left-hand side, and I'm going to ask Mario, if you would, to talk about yourself a little bit. Where are you from originally? When did you get your undergraduate degree, and then what are you doing currently?
Okay. I was born in Albuquerque, but lived in New Mexico and San Diego for about each of one half and the other half of my life. And then I moved to Virginia in 2010, started my associates at the community college here in Richmond. Then I transferred to Virginia Tech and got my bachelor's in meteorology in May of 2014. No, yeah, 2014. And now I'm doing my master's at Virginia Tech studying wildfires.
Cool, cool.
Yeah.
Alrighty. And when was your first trip with the Hokies?
It was 2013 during my transition from junior to senior year.
Okay, so this trip we're talking about tonight was your first trip. Cool.
Yes, it was my first trip as a student.
Okay. All right. Well, next I want to move over. If he's finished fooling with things on his bookshelf, I'll move over and talk to Paul Miller and ask him to introduce himself and answer those same questions.
Had to get the lighting right, Chris. Yeah, as Chris mentioned, I'm Paul Miller. I graduated, let me, I guess, start in chronological order. Grew up in a town called Franklin, Tennessee. It's about 20 miles south of Nashville, Tennessee. So spent my entire life there up until I graduated high school, and then came to Virginia Tech. Originally studied physics and planned to do that kind of for my undergraduate career. And then fortuitously, when I was a junior, that was right when the geography department started this new meteorology program, and I always had interest in weather. So I jumped over and kind of got my foot in the door right at the right time with the meteorology program, and was able to graduate with a degree in meteorology and the inaugural class of meteorology graduates in 2012. And then I stuck around to do my master's in the Virginia Tech geography department as well. Graduated that in 2014, and now I am at the University of Georgia in Athens, Georgia, working on my PhD in geography, but it is kind of a meteorology-oriented program, much like Virginia Tech's. Right. So I went on storm chases my first was as a student in 2011. I went on the May trip that year, and then my second was as a graduate student. I drove a van in 2013, which of course is the trip that we're discussing today.
Right, so you got to know our pain about driving all those miles.
Yes, it is much different from the driver's seat than it is from the passenger seat.
I gotcha. Let's see, I think I had one other question for you, but I'll hold that one for a little bit. So let me move to our next panelist, and we'll talk to Trevor White and ask you the same questions.
Well, yeah, I'm Trevor White, as Chris said. I grew up in Richmond. Came to Virginia Tech in 2009 as a business information technology major. A lot of complicated things happened. Became a photographer. Ended up going on the Stormchase in 2013, when we're talking about the first trip. And really then a lot of complicated things happened, and I'm now a master's student in geography studying meteorology. But my origin story is much longer if I don't put it in a nutshell.
Okay. Well, I thought what we would do now would be to hang on. There we go. I'll get this off. I'm still figuring a couple of things out on my screen here, so things have been rather interesting while I've been working on getting my computer rebooted. What we'll do now is we'll start going through the 2013 Stormchase. This is the first trip. there were 2 trips that year, and this trip we had 3 vans, 3 6-passenger vans, so there were 18 of us. But the drivers were myself, Paul, who's already mentioned it, and Dave Carroll, who's the instructor, and the 4th leader, if you will, was Robert Stonefield from the National Weather Service office here in Blacksburg. One of the unique things about this particular trip is that all of the students, pretty much this was their first trip. They had not been out before, so it was. Now I know, Mario, you'd probably chased a little bit when you were out west, but this was your first trip with the Hokies as well.
That is true.
Right. So what we wound up doing was we left Blacksburg. I've got my notes here on the 14th of May. What was a Tuesday morning, and it was one of those patterns where we had northwest flow. We actually scraped frost off the windshields before we climbed into the vans. That's how cold it was. We actually, some of our target areas that we were looking at, we'd actually 10 days before we got out there actually had snow on them. That's how chilly it was. And that was the other thing I was going to mention too in my notes here. One of the other factors on this trip, I tried to come up when I did a write-up what a good title would be, and I couldn't quite figure it out. It was either back off, the city's too close, which we did a couple of times.
Drop south.
Oh no, not another SPC moderate risk, which tends to mess things up for us. Or, man, we're really done with squall lines. But
I think run, and with the exclamation mark works.
Well, what I finally settled on was keep heading south, and as we get into this, we'll talk about just how far south we went that trip. So let's see, we took off, as I said, on a Tuesday morning, and we wanted to push because we wanted to get into northern Texas the second day. So we pushed pretty hard the first day, and I've got in my notes here, and by the way, you guys jump in anytime if I'm wrong, because these notes aren't necessarily 100% correct. We got to Conway, Arkansas for the first night, Tuesday night, and that was just a hair under 800 miles, if I got my numbers right. So we pushed pretty hard. And then typically what we do, what Dave does, and as we've talked about in previous broadcasts, we typically have an evening meeting to kind of talk about what's going to happen the next day, and then a morning planning meeting before we head out to talk about, to do our final targets, if you will, or at least initial targets for what that day's chase is going to involve. So we did that Wednesday morning, the next day, and then pushed really hard. So I've got in my notes here, we actually wound up going through, if I remember, this is not in my notes, you guys help me remember here, there was actually a small area of convection that went up somewhere around Oklahoma City that we had to drive through.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
And we were concerned about that messing up the convection, or that might be, early convection might mess up the later on stuff. So we pushed on through it, and we wound up down in Lawton, Texas. Went down from Oklahoma City. I think we went down Interstate 44, I believe it was, and went diagonally down that way. And let's see, I don't have a picture of this one, but what I remember was we kind of saw a nice storm,
Mm-hmm.
and we were looking for a place to pull off the interstate to take a look at the storm. So we pulled off this nice convenient exit, went up this nice ramp, pulled off, and people started throwing the doors open to get out of the vans, and I'm realizing we're at the front gate of Fort Sill with cameras and radios. So I immediately got on the radio and started yelling for people to get back in the vans and suggesting to Dave that probably wasn't a good idea if we didn't want to wind up in the stockade that night.
There's
I remember
Nick. Oh, sorry, Mario. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead. You start first.
There's our storm behind the barbed wire fence of the compound there with a wall around it.
Yeah, it was a nice looking storm, and that was actually where we parked up there near the front gate was a good vantage point. Unfortunately, I didn't think it was a good idea we'd stay there.
Yeah, I remember one of the students jumped out, started taking pictures, and I'm like, I grew up my father used to work in the Air Force, and I'm like, this looks a lot like where my father used to work at. And I was like, get back in the van. We're going to get arrested by the MPs. I was like, but still, look at that storm. Look at that. But get in.
Yeah, that's one known as one of those chaser trade-offs. You find a nice place to pull off and see a storm, and you realize, maybe this is not a good idea.
Yeah, maybe if there was a funnel cloud about to be touched down, maybe it'd been worth the stockades.
Well, and that storm in general was a nice surprise. I remember, at that point in the day, we were not, it was driving through convection just, to get really to more of our target area out in kind of central Texas, north central Texas, for that afternoon. And so I remember driving through a little bit of hail, I think, as we went through Oklahoma City, just small stuff. But yeah, really just it was kind of, you're just driving along the interstate trying to get to your target area, and then you kind of look out the window and look at radar, and you're like, like this might be worth looking at itself. And yeah, it was kind of an unexpected start to, I guess, not only that day, but really the trip too.
Right. And again, too, as I mentioned, that except for the three drivers plus Robert Stonefield, everybody else was pretty much new to chasing. So they weren't, the folks basically sitting in the back seats behind us didn't know really what to look for at this point. This was only the second day of the trip, and this was the first storm that we had kind of chased, if you will. So it was kind of a serendipity, if you will, at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's when we learned how to use the radar on the computers and the navigation software. So no tutorials. We just got, kind of be thrown into the deep end and learn how to swim. Yeah,
and Mario, I think you found between, I'll contrast that trip with the trip you went on with us 2014 now. It's a lot better when you have somebody that knows what they're doing that can act as a little bit of a mentor rather than jumping into that and trying to figure it out yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, it's kind of hard, and Paul knows too from having driven, it's kind of hard to be a mentor and teach people what to do when you're also driving and everything's happening behind you. You can't see the computer or anything.
Well, and that really kind of characterized this whole trip in the sense that, this is our second day. We pushed, to get to Conway on the first day, and now we're pushing again in order to, make it to Texas to perhaps see something. The SPC didn't think we'd see anything that day. But, there really wasn't a time to really, train. I mean, really from the beginning of this trip, we needed to, look at radar with an eye for, interpreting, features of severe weather. And so it was kind of it didn't really lend itself to, thorough training and education, all that, since it really was trial by fire.
Right. The learning curve was very steep that trip for the students, and I kind of felt sorry for them in one way, and the other way was, okay, well, whatever, they're going to learn.
Yeah.
That was, the 2013 chase was really my first experience actually doing any learning about severe weather whatsoever. I had absolutely no idea what I was doing. Of course, I was Paul's co-pilot. That didn't really help him all that much either.
Yeah, what I remember most about that trip was that was the first trip I'd been on, Trev, when you were the guy hanging out the window taking pictures everywhere. So,
literally hanging out the window.
Literally.
Yep.
Well, we pulled off that. Well, we actually went off, found another spot. I think it was a school or a playground or something at the top of the hill to watch that storm, and we kind of had to wave bye-bye to it because it was heading off into some unchaseable areas. So we jumped back on the interstate and headed back toward our original target, which was North Texas. And I know we were targeting a dry line. We were thinking a dry line was going to be down there to fire some stuff. And unfortunately, that dry line surged a bit further east. I think that's all still part of that whole northwest flow thing. The dry lines were moving further east than we thought. You got a picture there, Trev?
Just a little bit of dry line initiation. Nothing.
There you go.
Nothing really interesting.
Little Peleus there, looks like, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we wound up going down. I don't have all the routes and everything, but I know we kind of took a couple of detours because we didn't really have the mapping software worked out at this point. We were still trying to figure this out. So we wound up stopping, and I took a picture. If I can do this here, I'll do a screen share. Let's see. Will that come up? Come on there. No. I got a bug in my computer here, so never mind. But we wound up to the storm with a very nice lowering, a wall cloud kind of off to our east, which is not what you want to hear when you're chasing a dry line. You really don't need to be on the west side of the dry line if you want to see a lot. Now, the other thing I remember I've got in my notes here was we wound up on a side road, kind of at the top of a hill, parked on trying to look over a hill. We could see a storm on the other side of the hill, kind of going left to right in front of us, but we couldn't really see underneath the base. We kind of had a feel, yeah, there was a wall cloud there, but we couldn't see underneath it. And I remember, Paul, I think you and I were almost like sitting almost on top of the van or standing there, and I nudged you and said, you know, I bet there's a tornado under that. And sure enough, there was. Because the next day, the next morning, we went to a local, this was in Decatur, Texas, or in that area. We went to a local, I think it was a Walmart parking lot, and parked there. Dave had to run in to buy some stuff, and people were running around. And of course, we have the 3 vans with the mezzonettes on top, and with the Virginia Tech stickers all over the place. And so it's not like we're hiding. And one of the locals came up and told me about the tornado that she'd seen, and they crossed the road apparently not very far from where we were. Another picture there, Trev?
That is that storm. I don't have any in my set from that hilltop you're talking about, because that was basically dark. But
yeah.
that is our run up to it, at least.
Yeah, and
if I'm not mistaken, we were probably looking at the same storm they were where the tornado was at. We were just on the different side of it, because I remember seeing a lot of chasers during that night on that same storm.
Right, and as I remember, there were actually several tornadoes in that region, and that particular storm we had I think it was an EF0 was rated, the one we were looking at.
Yeah, I think I went and did a cursory glance at the SPC storm reports before we started up here, and I think there were 7 reports. I don't know how many confirmed tornadoes actually came out of it. I think a little more than that. Or than the 7 reports. Of course, the reports could be for the same tornado.
True.
But I just remember that was just such a surprise day. That when I remember when we were looking at the model output, we were really seeing some appreciable shear that wasn't really being commented on by anyone at the SPC or really the local forecasting offices. But we decided to. We're in the area. There's not, this is, might as well try to get there. And, just throughout the day, like with the morning outlook, the SPC was just, sticking to a 2% tornado chance. I don't even know if it was a slight risk. It might have been a C text.
I think you're right.
It was a C text that was upgraded later.
Yeah. And then by the end of the afternoon, they're up to 10% tornado risk, in our target area. So that one. To me, that was a great surprise for the first day, because we had been able to see the Pacific Trough digging in for several days in the models, so we knew that there was going to be a moneymaker later in the trip. But to really have kind of this mini tornado outbreak that caught the SPC by surprise on the second day of the trip, I mean, I was completely thrilled.
And we were right there.
Yeah.
And we've talked about that on, I guess, a couple of other chases too. That having the models and having so many eyeballs and weather geeks looking at them, we actually do a concentrated forecast, and many times we can put the Hokie Stormchasers in the middle of a good chase area before the SPC or somebody else fires off. Well, SPC would fire off, of course, a watch, or before any local forecast offices fire off any warnings. We're there because we've taken the time, we've gone through it all. We have the luxury of hours in the van to look at stuff like this, and I think that's what helps us. Well, after that excitement, I've got on my notes here that, again, as Paul was mentioning, we were looking at model forecasts, and we decided we wanted to reposition northward, as it looks like that first major trough that Paul mentioned was going to start swinging down and firing off some stuff further north. So we actually drove up and wound up in North Platte, Nebraska on Friday night. That was May 17th. And our expectations were, even in the evening meeting that night that we had in the hotel there in North Platte, that we were going to chase north of there, probably up into Cherry County or northwestern, maybe the Nebraska Panhandle somewhere. But, and as I've got here, as our 2013 chase theme indicated, where did we go on Saturday? South. We did not go north. Okay, and that was North Platte was actually the northernmost point that we reached on that chase on that trip, because we went south from there. If you remember, that day we wound up setting up shop in Hill City, Kansas. Right, kind of on the edge of town. There was a little park there, had a couple of benches and an overhang. I remember it being pretty hot too, because and warm. Like people were trying. Yeah, people were trying not to get sunburned. And we kind of sat there and ate dinner and chilled and watched radar. And one thing that I don't have in my notes here, but I distinctly remember, was the local sheriff stopped by.
Yes, I remember that.
And wound up talking to Dave, and I was doing something else. And the interesting part was, as Dave told me later, the sheriff chatted with him and kind of because it was obvious what we were doing. We got, again, 3 vans, maisonettes, college stuff, all over the sides of the vans. And the sheriff wound up telling Dave, look, if later on there's severe weather forecast, if for some reason my deputies have an area blocked off because of storms, here, give them my card and tell them to let you through. Okay? Well, the ironic part about that is that Hill City, Kansas, in that area, the sheriff in that area, there have been a number of run-ins with chasers, let's put it that way.
Negative experiences, yeah.
And so it just goes to show you, the kind of chase that Virginia Tech runs, and especially the stamp that Dave Carroll puts on it in terms of the integrity and the seriousness. We're not out there playing around. It can open some doors that other folks may not have open for. I found that very ironic that day. I remember sitting there. Here's my notes. About 3:30, we started that afternoon. Started seeing towers going up to the south, and so we jockeyed a bit, went a bit east, and then dropped south a bit. I remember stopping once or twice to verify, decide where we wanted to go, and we wound up just south of Hays, Kansas. I've got here 6:30. 6:30 p.m. local time. Must have come off of one of my pictures. And we found this nice dirt road, back road, nobody on it. Pull the vans up, and here comes this storm right at us with wall clouds. You guys remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
I'm about to share that one.
Yeah, you got some pictures. I got some pictures, but you guys got to have some too, I'm sure.
Well, this one's credit of Trevor. This was just the most amazing storm of both trips. What was another one I saw? This ground scraping wall cloud.
Oh yeah, I got the same picture up.
Yeah.
Yeah, look at this ground scraping wall cloud right here.
Yeah.
It's just incredible. And then I saw this. There was something a little embedded in there. Looks great on my thumbnail. I could barely see it there, but it was great. All right, let me stop sharing. There we go.
Well, and not only did we have a great storm to look at, but I just remember being astonished that we were the only people in that dirt road. I mean, not only was there just this beautiful backlit wall cloud, but we just had it all to ourselves. And that's really, as you guys, have noticed from multiple trips, like, that's pretty unusual.
Oh yeah. It was awesome too, because the road we were on pointed literally right to the mesocyclone, and we could hear the tornado sirens going off in Hays off to our north. That's a couple miles to the north, and that kind of gave an eerie backdrop. And the other part of it was the storm was moving slowly enough that we sat there for quite a while and just watched. Didn't even have to move.
Almost got ourselves hooked though.
Yeah,
we did. Very, very close.
We did. Yeah, that's a good picture of it. That was kind of. But I think what had happened was that that mesocyclone reformed a little bit further north, I believe, and so it wound up to overall missed us.
Yeah, I remember one of the funny parts of this chase. I remember Jeremy was like, "Oh man, we're gonna get hooked. I'm excited," and Dave's like, no, we're not going to get hooked. And then Robert looks over. He's like, we're going to get hooked.
Well,
And
Robert
then
wanted
Dave just
to
gives him this look.
Well, I went back and looked, and if I remember right, with this particular storm, there was a tornado reported underneath it by somebody in Hayes. So, what we were seeing, what we interpreted as I think was the RFD dust getting kicked up. Somebody picked it up as a funnel and reported it. Now, whether it was verified or not, I don't know. But I do know there was a tornado report on that.
I was just wondering if we just arrived to the show right during the credits. The tornado already happened, and it may have just died out as soon as we got there. But still, that wall cloud was just beautiful.
Yeah, it was. And it was classic. As I said, it was going slowly enough that it was really a good tutorial for everybody. I remember Dave standing there pointing things out and looking at this, looking at that. People kind of, getting the feel for what a really nice storm, it's a severe storm, looked like.
Yeah, I remember he says, like, if there was a tornado right there, that would have been the intercept of a lifetime. I'm sure he said that before, though, but if you're looking at the storm right here,
yep,
you just see this amazing rain shaft perfectly separated, and then you got this wall cloud, that ground scraping wall cloud. I still have that as my Facebook cover photo.
That was pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Now, what actually happened when we went, when the rain got too close, we pulled off and went east a bit and then went north to try to stay up with this storm on the north side of Hayes. And that was about the time, well, we went a little further north, and let's see if I can find this this picture that I have on here. It's this might do it.
It was wanting to produce a funnel when we were heading north, wasn't it?
Yeah, let me see if I can screen share this. If this will work. There we go. Yeah, this is a frame grab from my dash video, and what I've got circled there is that laminar funnel that's right there. And that was, if you look, there's the RFD cut too as well. So I think it did try to funnel, while we were approaching it. And as you see the lead band there ahead of us.
Yeah, I see it. Yeah.
That was some really great structure we were treated to.
Yeah, it really was. And then when we got
this lightning.
I'm sorry?
I also got this little lightning right here. Let me share it.
Okay.
So when you grab a lightning photo, you're like, oh yeah, exciting.
Yeah, see, I cheat. I take a frame grab off my my video there. So. And when we got up to where we were needed to pull off the storm because it was crashing in on us from the left, that's remember the television crew caught up with us from Channel 7 here in Roanoke. We added another van, so now we had 4 vehicles to our parade instead of 3. Let's see. We went from there. Let's see. I've got my notes here. We pretty much the storm outpaced us. And we decided to overnight. We went further east on I-70 and wound up overnighting in Salina, Kansas that night. You guys remember
that? How could I not?
What do you remember about that?
Great
Excellent
food.
food.
Great food if name is Fido. That's still the only one joke.
Too picky. It's all I can say.
No, I mean, I should have known better by ordering something called beef noodle. And then it came out, and I was just like, wow. Oh, and it was cold, and the waitress was so nice to offer to microwave it. And then she said that they didn't break into the fresh batch yet because they're still working on their old stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. If I was going to run a restaurant business, I wouldn't say that.
Understand.
Mistakes.
Yeah.
Well, what we did that particular next day, the next morning, was we again had our morning meeting. That was Sunday, May 19th, and we picked our target area, and we drove down. I think that's I-135 toward Wichita that day, and stuff was firing off to the southwest of Wichita. Discrete supercells, as I remember. So, of course, we had our 4 vans, now with Channel 7 being the last van behind us, the 4th one. And we wound up, I remember gigging Robert Stonefield about this. Because, and if he watches or listens to this, he'll have to come back to us. I was in the lead van. And, of course, I couldn't look at radar or anything. Because as anyone knows, you're driving, you can't really watch what's going on. So we came to a point where we could either go straight or veer off to the southeast or southwest toward the storms. And I got within like half a mile. I kept saying on the radio, "All right, we're going to turn. We're not going to turn. We're going to turn. We're not going to turn. We're going to turn." And I never heard anything, so I just kept going. Turns out, instead of going straight, if we had gone south to southwest, we'd have put ourselves in perfect position for that storm. What you got there, Mario?
It was a radar grab showing our GPS signal right there. And we were looking at this one tornado. It wasn't tornado warning at the time, though, but it did. Let me see if I can find another one of that same cell. Yeah, I don't see the GPS point right there, but I remember this chase. We were really close to a really looking good cell. And then we got really, as you can see right here, we got really close to Wichita. Almost said Wakita. Thank you, Dan Goff's Facebook profile picture. Yeah, the storm was headed right towards Wichita, and one of the things I remember was the chase of convergence. That was scary, and Paul can definitely emphasize on that.
Oh yeah, well, the town we were near in that area, because we did stop. Remember, we stopped and we were watching the storm come, and Channel 7 decided to do a little interview. And so they're interviewing one of the students. I think Becca, was getting interviewed, and all of a sudden this lightning CG just hit really nearby, and everybody kind of jumped and ran back into the vans. And we moved back in toward Clearwater, and we stopped a couple of places, but at that point the lightning had really ramped up, as I remember, and so we had to be careful how long we were out of the vans. You got a picture there, Trev?
Well, I just pulled up this wonderful wall cloud on that storm that we had to bail off of because chase of convergence was just so bad. I mean, we had this bearing down on us, the big green wall, and we ended up just fleeing for the next while. Chase of convergence in the city just really killed us on that day.
Yeah. Hey,
we almost got pelted by hail.
Yeah, we almost did. Did you? Were you the one, Trev? That probably. Were you the one that took the picture of what really you could tell how green that wall was coming?
This one, or
yeah.
Yeah.
They tell you it's green, and it's really green.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It is.
Killing those bugs.
Oh yeah. Our mezzonettes were very clean.
Yeah, and wasn't this about the time you lost your hat and sunglasses?
That was May 20th.
Oh,
I believe,
yeah.
actually.
That was with we had another vehicle with us though, but not approved vehicle.
Oh wait, no, it was the same day. Never mind. I'm looking through these photos. Yeah, it was moments before this photo was taken.
Okay.
But
well, we at this point, as we've talked about, we were boogieing east and trying to get east and south ahead of this because it was definitely getting to the point where A, it was too close to getting too close to Wichita, and B, it was getting too close to us, and C, it was a Sunday afternoon, and every local chaser in the world was out.
Yes.
Now remember, as we were pulling away from one spot, some of the guys in the last van, probably I think it was your van, Paul.
Yep.
Said that they looked like they thought they'd seen like a sideways funnel. Remember that?
Yeah. I've actually here. Let me screen share that.
it was Clayton. Clayton spotted that.
Yeah.
Clayton got it.
Let's see. Yeah. So I grabbed this picture. This is actually off of the National Weather Service assessment of the event, and at the time, so yeah, we're we had to peel off of the storm, and we're bolting away from it. And my van, I'm the third in the line of vans. I'm the last car, and yeah, the guys in the backseat of my car just are convinced that they are seeing a kind of this this rope tornado, and they describe Chris, as you've kind of said, like, you can't drive and look back. And I remember radioing to try and tell the other vans what we're seeing. I think I was still really hoarse at this point because I kind of came down with a bug during the trip. So one way or another, I mean, we ended up kind of continuing on our getaway, but Jeremy took a picture of it on his cell phone, which was much grainier than this, but it was the exact same thing. I mean, the way he described it, what he saw, and then was able to point out on his cell phone picture what it was. Basically, this picture that someone else took and sent to National Weather Service is just it's the exact same. I mean, I am ready to announce here on this Google Hangout that the 2013 May trip saw a tornado. So we didn't get a chance to all crawl out and take pictures of it, but I don't think we got skunked.
Right, and that actually wound up being the tornado of that day in Wichita that they really worried about. I forget what did it wound up being, an EF2, I believe, something.
Yep.
Yeah. So it was a substantial tornado, and if we had more time and there had been less chasers, I think we could have probably repositioned. But as it was, we boogied out of there, and but we didn't give up that day, if you remember.
There was 150 windshields got destroyed by the hail. That hail core was intense.
Yeah, we got out of the way of that storm, but there were other storms down the string of pearls along that line. There was other discrete storms coming up from the southwest, so we pushed off further south and east of Wichita out into the hinterlands of Kansas, if you will.
Oh, they were the hinterlands. That road.
And
that road.
And we wound up seeing some other cool stuff. And let me see if I got this one up here. I have
we ended up in the whale's mouth.
Well, one time we did. The whale's mouth with a good shelf cloud there. Yeah, there you go. I've got a picture similar to that. It's very cool looking. But then, if you remember, from this point, we went further north, and we saw a wall cloud cross the road in front of us.
Yep, that was the sight. That was quite a sight.
Yeah. So I just have this picture here of Dave pointing features out, but it's basically the same storm, and that was, and there you go. There's your RFD cut and everything again. That was just another good tutorial for everybody. Even though it didn't drop a tornado right in front of us, it was another cool storm to see. So that was a pretty busy day, as I remember. And we wound up pushing that day, and I'm trying to think. Where did we overnight? Anybody remember?
Wellington, maybe. I might be making that up.
I'm looking over here to my other screen here. Let's see. Arkansas City is where we stayed.
Okay.
There you go.
Yeah, I remember we had those two hotels side by side because we couldn't fit everybody, including the Channel 7 folks, in at the same hotel, so we kind of split up.
Oh, yeah, one of them had the pool inside that made it really super humid. Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah, we needed more humidity, right?
And that the trip to Arkansas City, as I remember, was actually a little more harrowing than we would have liked. We kind of found ourselves on the east side of what at the time were discrete cells, but were quickly merging into a bit of a squall line, and we ended up kind of having to shoot a gap in the line that was forming.
I have video of us going through that.
I mean, I remember it being scared. I mean, we were getting hailed on, and the radar scan that came through right after we shot the gap was like, I mean, if we had been trying to get through that line 10 minutes later, we couldn't have done it.
Yep. And that, as I said, that was one of the themes of this trip, was we kept getting trapped in front of these squall lines and trying to run east and south of them. So you're right. I mean, if we had waited a little bit longer, we probably would have still been running. Mm-hmm. So, well, coming into the fateful day of May 20th.
That day.
we had a little bit of a hot wash up the night before in Arkansas City. Then got up the next morning. That was Monday morning, and decided on our chase target. We knew we wanted to go south, and it was going to be southern Oklahoma. So we pushed out back to Interstate 35 and then dropped south on 35, and we drove through the whole metroplex there around Oklahoma City, and then we dropped down through Moore. And I remember as we were going through Moore and Norman, I remember getting on the ham radios and asking Dave about if he would recount to the crew his knowledge and experience about what happened during the May 3rd, 1999 tornado, the F5 that went through Moore and flattened it. And you guys remember he talked, he gave a good summation of that. And then right in the middle, one of the locals jumped on the radio. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
K5, yep.
Yep. What did he talk about?
He recounted recounted the events that happened on that storm. He said that that there was areas that he saw that he knew that just got completely devastated there, and he talked about how powerful that storm was and how it impacted him.
Right.
I mean, he also went on to say, like, you know, how resilient the area is, and how the only way you can really tell that a tornado ever happened there in '99 or 2003 was the fact that some of the homes look a little bit newer, but everyone's all rebuilt, and it's very resilient. And there's a lot of tornado shelters there now after those two tornadoes. And then I believe that was 11, just after 11 a.m. that day.
Yeah.
So then, just actually about 4 hours later.
Yep. And
Also, I remember when we stopped for gas and just had that quick break in Moore, Oklahoma. I was outside and I could feel the heat, the sensible heat coming off the ground, and it was really humid. You could feel the heat, and it's like now on the 2014 chase, I'm like, this feels like a high Cape day, just like it did in Moore. And that day, I remember what it feels to be in the high Cape and Ferry. You could just feel the heat coming.
I think it was 5,500 Cape in that whole area. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, it was rather explosive. So
yeah.
But even though the situation and the conditions in that area were really ripe, since we don't chase in urban areas, we kind of took a deep breath and kept going. So we wound up in the Pauls Valley area off of Interstate 35, which is south of Moore by about 45 minutes or so, I guess. And we pulled off into the western areas, and we got on one storm. There were several storms building. We got on one storm. Remember, we went north a bit, and it fizzled on us. What you got there, Paul?
It's just whenever it's relevant, it's just a picture of the storm we ended up pursuing down in the Pauls Valley area, so you can kind of see our waypoint in relation to that town.
Right.
Near Pauls Valley.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I remember distinctly driving north to try to keep up with that first cell we were chasing, and it died. So we pulled off the road because there was other storms forming to the south and west. So we did a U-turn. We were going to go back and catch the next storm south. But as we did, I remember looking north and seeing an anvil and thinking, I wonder what that storm is doing. Well, guess what? That wound up being the Moore storm.
Yeah. I think I can picture that. I'm trying to find it.
Did you get a picture of that anvil there?
Yeah, lots of pictures that day. I gotta fish through them. I don't think I have that one.
I think. No, wait. I may not have. I recently did a reprocess of some of the photos from this chase, but I think I may have already pulled it out and put it somewhere, and it's now lost in the depths of my hard drive.
I had the beaver skull of the storm that we were chasing.
But yeah, we watched several storms that day, and it actually tracked, in that Pauls Valley area. We wound up actually not too far from Purcell, Oklahoma, as I remember. Mm-hmm. And was that what you were thinking of there, Trev?
No. The one of the anvil, I actually went back and looked at our GPS data. There was a little cell just to our north that blew up between us and Moore that largely obscured our view. Yeah, that was real weird looking north at that storm.
Yeah, Mario's looking at some of the same stuff there. Let me see if I can share this one that I've got up here. This was, we pulled off the road, and this is where Dave took off and went further north.
Oh yeah.
And we wound up just stopping with the two vans and Channel 7, I think, with us, watching this wall cloud go down. And I think Dave was probably 2 or 3 miles ahead of us, looking at the same thing from a different angle.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember sitting there, and again, local law enforcement pulled up. I think it was the county sheriff, and in a pickup truck, and he and his wife was with him. And while I kind of wandered back to chat with him, and I heard on the radio I heard a report of a tornado. And I'm thinking, and it was on this storm. I'm looking at the storm, and I'm hearing this report, and finally the sheriff's wife said, "Well, that's Deputy so and so, whoever it was. They knew who it was. They knew where he was. They were further. The guy was further away from it than we were." And she just said, "He didn't know what he's looking at."
So it makes you wonder how many of those reports are from.
You got to watch out for the law enforcement reports.
Well, that's why they call them Sheriff NATOs, you know.
Yeah.
Sheriff NATOs.
You hadn't heard that before?
No, I haven't.
That's a typical chaser term there. What you got there, Trev?
That is a view of the wall cloud. I think it's actually slightly later than the photo you showed. But that's when it was the two vans parked on the side of the road after Dave went toward the storm at Dave's speed and left us behind.
Dave point two.
Yeah, Warp Dave. We had a really great vantage point on the storm as it passed by, but I think we ultimately just had to kiss it goodbye. But
yeah, we did. I was looking at my notes here, and essentially we kind of ran out of convenient roads. And while we were driving down the highway and some of those back roads is when we started hearing the reports coming out of Moore. You guys remember hearing those first initial reports?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
It was on the news, even at this gas station, I believe. Let me share this.
Oh,
yeah, I was just about to share that.
That's yeah. I remember talking on the phone to my dad at that gas station. Like, yeah, we're fine. We were like 20 to 40 miles south of Moore when that hit. I don't remember. What's really neat about this photo is this is actually a raw that I did not process at all. This is the sky looked that ridiculous.
And mind you, that was like at 5 o'clock in the evening. It was still, without those clouds, it would still be bright.
But we were at that gas station. I think we elected not to get fuel because the storm was so close behind us. But I think it snuck up on us, and we had to dash out of it.
Yeah, I think that was a potty break that it was like a one-holer, and then we had 18 bladders that needed to take care of, and we didn't take care of them because we kind of pull people out of line and says, we got to go now. Because
that's where Nick was inside warning everybody because there was a huge hail core that was about to pummel the entire gas station.
Yeah. So, and that view's looking west. So we did a UE, or actually, looked at that in our rearview mirrors and blasted east on that road. Remember, that was whatever that highway is, and I forgot to look it up, that runs east-west just north of the Red River, the Oklahoma-Texas border.
Yep.
And we ran for quite a while on that road. You guys remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a very long drive.
Saw some stuff.
Yes, we did.
We saw this nice little downburst. I think what we ended up ruling it was. But this photo of it is terrible. I never could get a great image of it. But
yeah, we saw, that was one we pulled off. Remember, we pulled off that one place that was like a casino or something? I don't know if it was a casino or it was something. And we tried to run up the hill to see if we could see a funnel underneath the wall cloud.
Oh, that was where I was like, oh, I have an angle here, and I jumped out of the van, and all the vans kept going. Like, oh, shoot.
But then, Paul knows where I'm going with this one next.
Yep.
Boswell, Oklahoma. Because
by this time I should say that the Channel 7 crew had peeled off and headed back to Norman. They were redirected by their bosses back here to go do some reporting up there. So they had left. They had gone back, taken advantage of the break in the line, and went back. And then we started going east on this road again. Dave is first. I'm in the middle. Paul's van's in the rear. And we get to see something like this. This is off in the field to our west. Maybe I think this may not even be the first one. I don't remember, Trev.
I think it tried to develop twice, and I think this is the second time.
Right. Well, this looks kind of decently far away. The first one dropped about 200 yards off the road, and it was about that time Dave hammered the accelerator. We're on a 2-lane road, mind you. He hammers the accelerator and disappears. And all of a sudden, I've got this car right in front of me with a double solid line and curves. And Paul and I are holding onto the windshield, the steering wheels, because the RFD was blasting us from the left. It's rocking the vans back and forth. So finally, we got to the point. I could see there was nobody coming. There was still a double solid line. I just went around the guy. And he's probably still wondering who those idiots were from Virginia Tech. But
he was going like 35. Yeah. I mean, that was it. I am not one for passing on the left with double solid lines, but I mean, he was asking for it.
It had to be done.
Yeah, there was a mesocyclone and a funnel, less than a quarter mile away, and I wasn't going to stick around.
Well, and
if we had a sunroof, we probably could have seen another funnel cloud.
That area does not have very good radar coverage. Because earlier today I tried to pull some data, and the forget which radar it is. It's the Fort Smith, Arkansas radar.
Right.
Is the closest one, and that's 114 miles away. Mm-hmm. So we didn't have very good radar on what was going on around us at all.
Well, this is I think this storm is another example. Kind of like what we ran into in Oklahoma City on the first day. We really, or at least in my mind, this was in getaway mode. It was kind of like chase time's over. Like now we're just trying to get away from the squall line so that we can maybe find an overhang to ride this out at, or maybe dive south below it. And really, at least in this point, like actively chasing was not part of my paradigm. And and then all of a sudden, we're seeing all these features drop out of the sky to our left, and it at least to me they were rather that was like not the name of the game at that point, but we're still getting treated to these great storm features nonetheless.
That's called chase or be chased.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it is a good point. Something to point out to folks that are thinking about chasing, or maybe going with the Hokie Stormchasers, or maybe haven't been out, going by themselves chasing, say here in Virginia. Never give up on a storm. Always keep your head on a swivel. You never know what's going to come up, what's going to form in another location. You always have to be alert, and that's tough, as Paul has alluded to, when you're driving and you're trying to maintain situational awareness, be safe on the roads, but also to be aware of what's going on around you. It's a little bit more of a mental strain than anything else, isn't it, Paul?
Mm-hmm. It is. It's stressful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you never know when you start to give up on the storm. Just like on the 2014 also chasing this one, you look up as like, oh, there's a funnel cloud right there.
Yeah, it can keep your focused, your focus pretty sharp there.
Mm-hmm.
Now we continued east that day until we got far enough east that we got out ahead of the line, and we dropped down into Texas. I believe I've got it here. We stayed in Paris, Texas that night, in that area, which is that part of Texas is and as Oklahoma, as we saw, is really not good chase country. It's a lot of winding roads, a lot of tree lines, so it's really not where you want to be to chase storms. But the thing that sticks in my mind that next morning, which was the day after more, it was Tuesday, May 21st, the phone calls. We started getting phone calls, Dave and I, left and right, from media, back here, I mean, from everywhere, from Roanoke to Washington to Richmond. And the fun part about the whole thing, Dave had left his cell phone at the hotel in North Platte, and he had given everybody, or the folks at Tech, the public affairs office, I guess it was, had given them my cell phone number. So all these phone calls are coming up on my cell phone, and they want these interviews. And we were driving along, we're trying to find places to talk, and just it was driving Dave and I crazy, frankly. Just talking to all those folks and trying to run a storm chase too. We tried to do what we could to oblige them all, but what we wound up doing that day was we kind of positioned ourselves south and east of Dallas-Fort Worth area. If you remember that, we looked at some stuff. We felt like it was gonna. It wasn't a great day. I don't know. Did anybody remember? Was it a sea test in that area?
Dave was optimistic.
I think it was a moderate risk.
I think so too.
Well, I'll pull up the convective outlook.
Yeah, pull it up.
The 21st.
That figures because moderate risks suck as far as my chasing goes.
Now I'm pretty sure though, while it may have been a moderate risk, I think that was mostly for a damaging wind threat. I think the tornado threat was significantly downgraded that day with good cause. However, let's call this foreshadowing. But at this point, I'll give a little plug that I think when we started looking at the SKU-Ts that morning and poring over the data, I remember thinking to myself, I want to be in Waco. That was what. Now, granted, we were a little far away from it at that point, and I remember that some people in this hangout might have offered some resistance to that idea.
I think the quote was, "I don't want to go any farther south than Waco." I think that was the quote.
That was the quote. I still don't want to go any farther south than Waco, but I wound up with no choice that day.
Yeah.
Because things started firing, and there was a cold front and a dry line coming through, kind of south and west of Dallas, that was starting to fire things. So it looked like if we could position ourselves right, we could intercept maybe a discrete cell or two that would come up along that. Unfortunately, as is the case with most of this chase, those discrete cells quickly lined out. We had ourselves a squall line again. So, and I will blame this on Robert Stonefield. To my dying day, I'll blame this on where we stayed that night on Stonefield, because he was watching radar, which of course I couldn't do, and he saw this nice, discrete monster supercell at the southern end of that line, which was way the heck down in Texas, way south of Waco. So he said, "We need to go here," and I remember complaining about it, but then I shut up and we went there. And we wound up. I don't remember the name of the town we stopped in where we saw the storm coming. We watched. Remember that little convenience store? Anybody have that one? I don't remember the name.
No, but I remember somebody who lost their hot dog and their contents of their wallet.
Yeah, was that somebody that got a hot dog no matter where we stopped?
I think it was Huntsville.
Yeah, that Plainsville. That sounds familiar. I don't know. Let me try to pull it up on a map.
It could be. But I do remember that essentially all we saw that night was, well, I should say all we saw. We saw a pretty cool shelf cloud. It was an awesome shelf cloud. But we didn't ever see anything else other than that.
It was we saw some great looking shelf clouds that last day. I do gotta say.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think too. I remember when we were camped out in that town. We had. I remember the SPC issued an MD for our storm. So we'd driven out of the way for it, and we ultimately it ultimately didn't produce for us. But it was. It was really the only option that day. And as far as I remember, I think the entire plains. I don't think there was anything going on that day aside from our area of Texas.
I think you're right. I think I remember that we, again, it was a matter of projecting where you want to go, and you adjust based on the conditions, and really and truly, that part of Texas was where the action was. My problem was, as we found out the next day, we had a long way back to Blacksburg from there.
Mm-hmm. Here's some pictures of the shelf cloud I have. Oh, that's a terrible one. I think Trevor might have some nicer ones.
I've got my favorite shelf cloud photo from the chase up.
Oh, there you go. I'll screen share the one I have. It's not as good as any of those. But this is the one I had taken at some point.
Oh, that's a nice one.
It was still pretty grainy, but yeah. But
yeah, it's that guy.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
That was a killer shelf cloud.
So
that cloud.
What do we call that? A KP5, right?
yeah, that was rated a KP5. So now from there, that pretty much was it for the chasing, because as you can see in these pictures we were showing of the shelf cloud, it was getting dark. And without a lot of lightning, you don't really want to be out there chasing, especially in unfamiliar territory. So again, we ran ahead of this squall line, because that discrete cell that we had gone after was no longer discrete. It was still, that line was still building down to the southeast. So we pushed east, wound up getting into, if I've got my towns right, it was Conroe, Texas, which is a whole 40 miles north of Houston. Okay, that's how far south we were.
South of Waco.
Yeah, well south of Waco. And so we parked and went in, and I remember, kind of pulling my computer out and looking at stuff, and kind of getting ready for bed, but not really. And then Dave's looking at radar, and I'm thinking, what's he looking at radar for? So I pull radar up, and here's all these cells coming right at us. So, and there was hail in them. A couple of them had rotation. So, all right, crawl back out of bed, or I don't think I was in bed, but crawl back, put my shoes back on. We went downstairs to move the vans, because we wanted to move them under the overhang in case there was any hail. We couldn't figure out. We didn't know what room you were in, Paul. We'd have dragged your butt out there too.
Hey, it was the only place that day where I actually had cell phone service and good radar coverage, and I'm staring at this radar feed, and I was like, there's a rotation headed right towards my GPS location.
Oh yeah. So Dave and I went downstairs to get the van, and this is like 1:30 in the morning after a long day of chasing, and there's like 8 people down there, eight of our Hokie chasers down there. We weren't the only knuckleheads.
Myself included.
So we moved the vans under the overhang, and then proceeded to stand there and watch. And sure enough, there were a couple of mesos and even a wall cloud underlit by some lightning that went by not far north of us. And that particular storm was tornado warned too while we were sitting there watching it.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, my that was a bit of an embarrassing point in the trip for Robert and I. Because I remember, we, as you mentioned, Chris, it was a long day of chasing, and we were just zonked. And so we both went to bed. Robert was my roommate for that trip. And we just both woke up the next morning just well-rested and checked our cell phones to see what time it was. And we both had, the emergency text messages saying, from like 1:30 a.m. saying, you've been tornado warned, seek shelter. And we just slept right through it. But you know what? I think that goes to show that the Hokie Stormchasers are so talented that they can that they're able to catch tornado-warned supercells in their sleep. So that's, I think, very very impressive.
I didn't wear my boots tonight, Paul.
No.
Well, that was pretty much it for our chasing, because from there we had to get back to Blacksburg, and
sad drive back.
Any of you that have ever chased with Dave knows that Dave likes to push long hours. And so we pushed long hours that day. We wound up in, it was north of Chattanooga, Tennessee that night. Well, actually, early the next morning.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You forgot the nice stop at the Mississippi River.
Oh, yeah, we stopped there. It's got some good pictures there, I remember.
Oh,
but,
yeah, I got some great pictures here.
Paul remembers that day. That was the marathon day driving.
Yep.
18 hours, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, it's and we ended up getting in at like 3 a.m. or something. And I remember, and we were, trying, and we wanted to get back to Blacksburg at a reasonable hour for anyone that had to continue driving on to D.C. or Richmond or anything like that. And I just remember thinking, like, are we really going to pay for a hotel room tonight when we're going to get here at 3 a.m. and leave at 7 a.m.? Like, do we get a discount if we're only here for 4 hours? But it was, sometimes I'll still, whenever I'm doing a long drive, just pull up a map and just look at the distance between Conroe, Texas and Chattanooga, Tennessee, and it just baffles my mind that we drove that one sitting.
Yeah, and for those of you that don't know, a lot of times late at night when the drivers are talking to each other on the radio, it's to keep each other awake.
That was getting pretty silly.
It was getting tough. I was pinching myself trying to make sure I stayed awake the last hour, but yeah, we got there. And then of course we made it back to Blacksburg. So that's pretty much the trip itself. I want to kind of switch now to a couple of things. First of all, if you have any folks might watch this now or be watching it later. If you have any recommendations for like new Hokie Stormchasers, say folks that might go on this year's trip or future years' trips, what would you tell them? Mario, what would you tell them?
Good question. Okay, definitely. We have these computers that have navigation software. So what I try to do, especially in 2014, I'll discuss this in the next episode or after next. Get to know the navigation software, learn how to use it. Looking at the maps, paper maps are really important, as we'll discuss later how important those are needed when technology seems to fail us. Eyes. The back seat feels like they got the cruising speed because they're not in front of a computer or they're not on a radio, but they're in the back seat, eyes outside, and like Jeremy, me and him and Clayton, we were looking at the back and we were just seeing that sideways funnel when nobody saw it. And yeah, that was really important too. And also, one of the things I really stressed, what I learned from this trip, and I stressed on the 2014 trip, was bring your computers to the meetings, pull up, already have stuff pulled up, because there was a couple of us who didn't even look at any radar data or any satellite data or weather models and just waited for the briefing. And I think that's really important for all the students to come in with ideas where they want to go, so we get more of a consensus, not just saying, hey, Dave saying, hey, this is where we're going to go. Everybody's like, cool, I'll get in the van. Looking at satellite, that was important too. I mean, that's like your best. During the early mornings, you don't have the soundings though, but you can look at visible and infrared satellite, and you can see where the shear's at. I mean, that was the biggest indicator. So even in the morning, that was my number one thing, was looking at satellite data. Okay. And also, no soda. Stop the sodas. Don't make you pee.
Better yet,
All
don't
right.
drink after 7 a.m.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, Paul, what would you say? What would you recommend to your recommendations to new chasers?
Well, I'm going to be, I really should take my own advice here. I'm not the best at this, but kind of, you know what I'd say is that you can look at radar anywhere. When there's a severe weather outbreak and the plains, early spring, I'll be looking at all the radar that's going on out there from here in Georgia. And when you're out on the plains, you have this unique opportunity to actually see what's going on. And the temptation, and it is so strong, and I myself am terrible about this, is to look at radar and actually see what the radar is showing you the storm looks like when that same storm is right outside your windshield. And my recommendation would be is just to trust your eyes and to know that the NCDC is going to archive that radar imagery, and they're going to store it away from you on one of their own servers. It's not even going to take up room on your computer. And you can go back and look at that anytime you want. But there is no going back and looking at the actual storm itself. And so yeah, just resist the temptation. Put away the radar scope. Peel your eyes away from GR and just really look out the window, climb out of the car, and just actually look at the cloud itself.
Amen to that, because
yes.
There's so much that you can tell that a lot of people never get a chance to see. A lot of forecasters that are stuck behind a radar screen in a forecasting office somewhere will never be able to see what you're seeing with your eyeballs. And I think it's a good lesson to do. That's a good thing, good piece of advice.
Hey, Paul, to add on to that, on the 2014 chase, I was tempted to confiscate cell phones. They're like, all right, you'll get them back at the end of the chase.
Yeah.
All right, Trevor, you've been on a couple chases now. What's your advice?
Well, I'm the one who always has the most gear, so I'd say pick out everything you want to pack and then only take half of it. But really, I mean, just to build on what Paul said, I think from an experiential standpoint, not being glued to your radar is good, but also your radar will lie to you.
Yeah.
We were this honestly more so in 2014, and of course this was the case in Boswell with our little funnel cloud as well. But I mean, the radar beam is 10,000, 15,000 feet in the air once you get 100 miles out from the radar. I don't care what's up there. You got to have your eyes on what's happening. And I mean, Chris, you say this a lot. The Mark 1 eyeball.
Yep.
There's nothing better than that. So.
Well, also the radar takes a couple minutes to update, and between those the two times, you can have a funnel develop. You have a spin up, and then it disappears before the radar comes back and sees that.
Mm-hmm.
That was true during our Wyoming chase on 2014.
Yep, and we'll talk about that. I've had that happen here to me in Virginia actually this year. It was a storm that blew up in between radar scans and had developed a wall cloud before anything showed up on radar at all. So, all right.
Hopefully, with cells, we'll have a better experience with that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna come back to you guys and ask you in a little bit, just a couple minutes here, for your favorite go-to website for forecasting severe weather. So if you don't have that on hand, you get that for a second. But I've got an announcement to make concerning the next Google Hangout, which will cover the second 2013 Hokie Stormchase trip. It's scheduled for Tuesday, January 27th at 8 p.m. That's Eastern Standard Time. And it's obviously that is is kind of a watershed Hokie Stormchase trip because that bracketed the El Reno tornado, which was a seminal event for chasers. So for that particular episode, the panelists will not be students. The panelists will be the trip leaders. So on that panel will be Kevin Myatt, Jen Henderson, Dane Webster, and Dave Carroll, and myself. So that'll be a special episode. Again, that's Tuesday, January 27th at 8 o'clock Eastern Time. So we'll make sure we get the word out and all that. And the other part of that is, if anybody watching this live or later on recorded on my YouTube page, if you want to ask specific questions of the panelists about that trip or anything about that trip, email the questions to me. Okay? And my email address is cjwhite@vt.edu. So if you want to, ask specific questions, you can email them to me, and I'll bring them up, and we'll have a good discussion on that. Okay. Well, let's kind of wrap this up here with our go-to websites. I'll start on my right this time and go to the left. So what's your go-to website for forecasting severe weather, Trev?
I'm going to have to go with Kamala, Kamala. It's on the College of DuPage site. I'm going to try and screen share it if that'll work. Yes. Is that working? Is that what I intended to happen? But it provides the text products for all the different forecast offices around the country. So let's see. Well, if you want to get
really
like
nice.
the Goodland, Kansas, you can get the hazardous weather outlook, which is like the day 1 and 2 forecasts. But it's one thing to look at model outputs and look at what the SPC has to say about a given day, but it's also really, really important to have a look at what the local forecasters who have been there for years are saying about an event. So we found that really handy both years that I've gone.
And one thing I like about that particular website is it's pretty much all text. So when you're out there and your signal is not very good from your cell phones, or you don't have much broadband or any broadband, that'll load without any graphics, and that helps. Okay, Paul, what you got?
Well, I'm not very creative here. My favorite, or my kind of go-to website, pull it up here, is just a normal SKU-T. So I go to weathercaster.com, Earl's weather page here, and what I love about the SKU-T is just it gives you basically it's a one-stop shop for whatever location you're concerned with. So here's this isn't from Earl's page, but just kind of what you would be looking at, and it basically tells you everything about severe weather that's going to be going on at a given location. So I just love looking through maybe 10 or 20 of those and just figuring out, what locations got it all. And so kind of in some ways, I think a picture's worth 1,000 words. And I think, nothing beats an old-fashioned SKUT.
Okay, cool. That's a good site. I like Earl's site in a lot of ways. So, all right, Mario, what do you have as your go-to website?
Okay, well, Paul stole one of mine, which was the Earl's SKUTs. That's a really good one. But I love the I call it College of DuPage, trying to make it fancy, kind of like Target. But let me pull it up really quick. Entire screen. Here, I like to look at the satellites. Like I said, satellite data is one of the greatest things you can look at when it comes to early morning before all the SKUTs are out. And also just basic model. I mean, the College of DuPage website has a really good interface for mobile phones, and it's really good. And also, you cannot forget the SPC. The SPC is probably your go-to page, and also the National Weather Service. They will tell you what's the forecast discussions is really important. And you'll have the SPC, but if you look at the local forecasts and see what they're saying, they're probably seeing something that you're not seeing. And let me stop sharing before I do a matrix. So there's thousands of ways to look at different weather models from different websites. But when you're on the Stormchase and your phone goes into sprint mode, which means you don't get good reception, just narrow it down to your top favorite site, and also the HRRR. That's another one I forgot to mention. The HRRR on the SPC website is a very, very reliable piece of information.
Okay.
But yeah, I try to keep it down to like at least 4 or 5, nothing more than that.
And if you would just pick those and drop them in an email to me. What I'll do is when this particular video posts on my YouTube page, I'll put these websites, these links in the comments section if anybody wants to go look them up. If they don't have them now. So,
okay.
Alrighty. Well, we're coming up on close to an hour and a half, even though with my little hitch at the beginning. So, kind of going to get close to wrap it up here. How about any final comments about this particular chase, or chasing in general, or?
I'll kind of add one. Just looking at all of our web pages, they were all kind of geared around forecasting. But I think something that's really, really neat too is kind of looking back after the fact at what you witnessed on a given day, and a lot of times that'll be looking at a local WFO's actual page, and a lot of times they'll do great write-ups on maybe something you saw the day before. In the case of one of the tornado picture that I showed earlier, that was an example of where we didn't actually get that picture, but sometimes you can look at this write-up later on and you can get maybe great views of the storm that you saw, but maybe just from a perspective that you weren't able to achieve yourself. Also looking at P&S reports from weather surface offices, so a public information statement, just letting you know, oh, we're sending a survey team out to this spot that you were yesterday. That's just really cool stuff, and especially in the morning before the new model outputs come out, it can be cool stuff to mull over.
Okay.
Also, Twitter helps quite a bit too.
What does? I'm sorry.
Twitter. That one's really good, helpful, because if you think you see a tornado, you can, and if you follow a lot of storm chasers, you could see what they're seeing, and then you can kind of get some of the inside scoop there too.
Right, and I do use Twitter to send in storm reports to National Weather Service office in Blacksburg here, because they have a social media desk that watches that kind of stuff, and most offices do these days, as well. So, if you don't have time to stop and make a phone call, you can always attach a picture to Twitter and say, here's what I'm seeing, here's where I am. So yeah, that's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Trev?
I think y'all pretty well covered all the bases, actually.
Okay. Well, I enjoyed this particular chase, the 2013 first chase, it was for a number of reasons. I didn't particularly enjoy the drive back from Conroe, Texas, but but it was a good crew, and we saw a lot of good stuff. We never even talked about what was the trying to think. What was that road we were on? Remember, was it in Oklahoma or Kansas? That dirt road we were on forever.
Oh, that was in Kansas, I think.
Yeah, that was the Wichita chase day. I remember I had my GPS in front of me, and I keep telling Paul, like, we have a road coming up, but it's in 3.5 miles, and we're going like 3 miles an hour.
Yeah.
This storm
And
was
then we
moving
had
faster than that.
we had the two guys popping Bud Light behind us, following us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we
And
had
cows
our
had
chasers.
escaped,
Yeah.
too.
Yes.
We had cows loose on that road as well.
Yeah, I remember going down that road, bumping down that road at however slow we were going, looking at the storms over my left shoulder, thinking,
Yeah.
you know, they're going faster than we are.
Yep.
They're getting closer. So, but yeah, I mean that's typical of any chase that you got, you know, things like that. You make you make your best decisions based on the information you have, and then you just go from it. And of course, you know, Dave always makes sure that we're always in a good position without being in a too risky of a position.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Dave's not an extreme chaser, and he's not going to let the Hokies do that either. So, you know, sometimes you get into positions where you have to just get out of there, and we've all seen that. But you know, we never were in any real danger from any of that. And for that, that's one of the reasons why I chase with Dave.
Yeah, kind of on that note, Chris. You know, I'm sure this is the same for you guys as well. But whenever, you know, especially in the days following that chase, whenever I talk to someone, you know, I'd say, "Oh, I was storm chasing," and just the first thing they would say was, "Oh, well, were you in more?" And you would say, "No, we don't chase in cities," and they would kind of ruffle their, eyebrows and say, "Oh, what? Huh? Why not?" And I think that, in someone's head, they just kind of assume that, like, that's a cop-out answer of, like, oh, I was on the wrong storm, but I'm going to tell you that I don't chase in cities, and that's, like, my excuse. But I think that our Wichita day provided us with just a hint and a taste of how dangerous it can be to chase around cities. And in our attempt to get away from that storm, we just, kind of just kissed, the side of more of a developed area, and it's scary to be running away from a storm, and then all of a sudden you, like, pass a Barnes and Nobles, and you're at a traffic light, and it's like, and it's the worst feeling ever. And just then to magnify that by 100, to be in the middle of a town with a incredibly dangerous tornado bearing down on you, it's something that it's really hard to articulate to just the average non-meteorologist or non-storm chaser. But I think that this chase provided us with a good understanding of why we don't do that, and it's that was definitely a learning point for me.
Right, and that's exactly one of the things we're going to talk about in the next series when we talk about the El Reno tornado and what all that meant, for that same very reason. And while I'm thinking about it, one thing I was going to mention, I was going to name drop because he dropped your name when he did a Google Hangout with the Virginia Tech Meteorology Club. That's tell Dr. Shepard we said hi.
Oh, yeah, I'll pass it on.
Also, one little takeaway message from this storm chase was, like, we had some communication with people in Blacksburg versus us on the chase, and they learn on the next year's chase that geography plays a huge importance on storm chase. You'll see this beautiful development on radar, but little did you know, there's, like, no roads that's going over the Red River. The Red River was a huge challenge for us, and also trying to chase in eastern Oklahoma because you start flirting with the Ozarks in that area. It's just flat. We go to the Great Plains for a reason. It's flat. You could see the entire sky as far as the horizon will allow you to, and there's a good road network. But there's challenges while navigating on those roads where you want to go in one direction, but there's no roads going that way, and sometimes you get too close to a city. You get too close to a river, and you just gotta leave it. You just gotta abandon it because, I mean, it'll be great for flying in hover cars, though. But when you're on four wheels, you gotta obey the rules of the road, literally.
Yeah, and that's some of the trade-offs, and I think that's, again, we've talked about this on some of the chases too. That's, I think, for many people who've not been, say, west of the Mississippi River by car anyway, And you get an idea of how, first of all, how vast this country is, and secondly, you get a feel for the geography, the difference in features and how things change. And as you were saying, Mario, just because there's a storm over here and you're over here doesn't mean you can get there. If you look at it on a map, that might be a 12-hour drive. It doesn't look that far on a map, but you can't get there from here and still chase that storm the same day.
And I mean, on our drive up to North Platte from Salina, we definitely ran into that because we were looking at anvils going up somewhere north of us, and then we look at radar and they're on the South Dakota border, 6-7 hours up the road. I don't even know if we were really in Nebraska at that point. And you're seeing these storms. You can see the anvils going up, but there's just no way you can get to them by dark.
Yeah, it's a lot different than being here on the East Coast. As Mario said, the horizons out there are so far out that it's hard to conceive until you're there. So,
yeah.
Well, any last thoughts? I'm getting ready to wrap it up here.
Well, I do have to applaud Paul for being such a patient pilot with me, for both being a good instructor and also being very tolerant. I remember when we got our little funnel outside Boswell, I'm like facing the wrong way in the car, leaning over him, shooting like one-handed out of his window to take pictures of this funnel, and he's like trying to drive 80 billion miles an hour, being hit by atomized rain and RFD at the same time.
Well, it was worth it to get those pictures.
Yeah, since I don't think anybody else got pictures.
It was dark.
No.
It was very dark.
So, well, hey guys, I appreciate your time and I appreciate your efforts. And hey, we'll have to do some chasing again today at some time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
All
Gotta
right.
go on a Team Chattanooga reunion tour. Or was it Team Core Punch?
Core Punch, yeah.
We don't say that on air.
Yeah.
All right, guys, have a good night. We'll be chatting sometime soon, I'm sure.
All right.
All right, sounds
All
good.
right.
See you.
All right, good night.
Looking forward to the next one.